Well, welcome back, folks. I thought as I began the breakdown of the SL125 Honda, since I'm at the very beginning of this project, I would share with you my approach to breaking down a bike and organizing and cataloging the parts. And for those of you that have been with me for a while, probably realize by now I'm a bit anal retentive, and I take my time on this kind of thing. And my experience has taught me that it's far better to take the time now during breakdown to identify and catalog my parts and organize them in such a way that when I come back to them later to either repair or replace and begin the reassembly of the motorcycle, I have some semblance of order. It can easily take me half a day to a whole day to break down a bike. I don't just take the parts off the bike and chuck them in a box and then come back to it later in, months later or even a year or more later in some cases and try to figure out what it was. Obviously in some cases it's easy to identify a part, other cases it's not. So I take my time now, which pays dividends later. So I'm right at the beginning of this project. I haven't done much yet outside of pull the fuel tank and the seat off, and I have begun removing some of the rubber grommets and fittings from the frame. The first thing I do when I'm preparing to break down a bike is I just take a notepad and I create 4 categories: missing, replace, chrome, and notes. Date up in the corner just so that I can keep track of when I started the breakdown of the bike. Of course, when you're seeing this, it'll be later than July of 2020. And it's just as it sounds. As I began working my way through the breakdown, I'll start keeping track of the items that are missing. So for instance, I already have noticed I am missing the ignition switch, the right handlebar switch. The lower half is gone. The top half has just been zip tied to the handlebar itself. I've also noticed the clutch and brake handlebar purchase are there, but they're not original. They're aftermarket. They're black plastic. So those need to be replaced. And then, of course, chrome. I'll just make a note of each chrome item that I remove and keep track of this so that, and put it in that a separate plastic container. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I can keep all the chrome items that need to be replated gathered together. And then the notes is just observations that I have picked up on during the course of the breakdown. For instance, one of the things that I just noticed on the frame is that the steering head stop, when you turn the handlebars from maximum left to maximum right, from lock to lock, there's little metal blocks that were welded on the frame steering head that are broken off. That's not unusual. I've encountered that on other bikes before. So that'll be a note that will go in here with anything else. This is a working document, and when I'm pretty well completed with the breakdown, I will transfer this over to a simple spreadsheet that I keep on my home network LAN, so I can access it from any computer that I have. I have 2 laptops, a desktop in the house, a desktop in the shop. The reason I do that, excuse me, is if I'm like off in a coffee shop, sometimes my wife and I will go to a coffee shop and we'll surf the net a little bit and get a cup of coffee. Or if I'm sitting in a house in the evening and I'm sourcing parts, looking at eBay or looking for used items, I can access that spreadsheet regardless of my location. But that'll come a little bit later. First, I just use this as a working document. As I remove the parts from the bike, I start cataloging them, and what I mean by that is organizing them in such a way that it makes sense to me later. So for instance, I have started removing the frame grommets, the rubber components, and by the way, I save all my old plastic bags. I have all kinds of these parts have come in over the years, and I just reuse them. I wipe them off and reuse them. And you can see here I have taken a plastic bag and labeled as fuel tank and frame grommets. And that's what these parts will go into this bag. And I also make a note of the part number on the Honda parts diagram that this part corresponds to. So if I go look at an SL125 1971 model, look up item number 2 on that parts diagram, it will be these 4 frame grommets. Otherwise, they all start to look alike, and over time, you know, months later, you're trying to remember what came from where. So those are item number 2. These are item number 11. And these are the tank bumpers that fit on each side of the front of the frame where the tank slides down over. I know what these are. I don't need to identify those specifically because I know what those are by looking at them. I just use these simple little paper tags that you can buy at any stationery store. I have quite a few. I got a couple of boxes of these, quite a few of these around. Simple marker and a pencil. So I pull the parts one at a time, organize them, look them up on the computer, identify them, and then we'll put them in this bag. And from here they'll be transferred over for storage in some totes that we'll talk about next. I use these clear plastic totes. I prefer clear because I like to be able to look and see what's inside of them without having to open it up. I reuse these totes. These have been used on multiple projects. The larger one on the bottom I will use for general storage of the various components that I remove from the project bike. So after they're sorted, labeled, identified, they'll go into that bottom, the deeper of the 2 plastic tubs. The top one will be used for chrome. So as I alluded to, when I remove the chrome items, I will catalog them, and then they will all go into the top, a little narrower plastic bin, so that I can keep the chrome separate from the rest of the parts. Now, I don't send my chrome in right away to be replated. I usually will wait a bit to make sure I have everything together and I haven't forgotten or missed anything. Usually takes, well, my most recent chrome job for the YL1, which is the exhaust and the engine side cover, took about 5 or 6 weeks. So 6 to 8 weeks is kind of normal. So I've got plenty of time to send the chrome off. There's no real rush. But that's how I store the parts once I've cataloged and removed them. Well, it's actually the next morning. I spent about 5 hours yesterday breaking this bike down to the extent that you see here. Didn't work on it all day yesterday. My wife and I had a few other things we wanted to do. So, but I did spend 5 hours or so to get it in this condition. As you can see, I have all the major pieces off. The wheels, front forks, obviously the engine, muffler, etc. Over here you can see the chrome is in the top bin, and all the other miscellaneous parts are in the bottom bin. A couple things I wanted to talk about here quickly. The fork tubes, the inner fork tubes are 1 model year only, wouldn't you know it, for this bike. No longer available, of course. Doesn't seem to be a lot of them out there. Those tubes are not reusable the way they exist for restoration because they have rust and pitting in the hard chrome. So I'm going to have to come up with a solution for the fork tubes, which all my projects I go through this. The engine, there's some pretty serious things going on with this motor. The transmission won't shift. Everything is locked up tight in a drum. No pun intended there. But the output shaft won't spin. Clutch doesn't work. Won't kick over. Someone's attempted to get into it. I think they abandoned the project. So that's gonna be pretty big deal on the engine. The frame looks pretty good actually. I don't see anything major with it so far in terms of damage or twisting or cracks so far. I'm fairly pleased with that. Same with the swing arm. Right there, you can see the swing arm. The muffler is also going to be a problem. It's got a little dent here at the end. That's not the issue. The issue is right here where it connects to the engine. There's supposed to be a flange, a round flange that the muffler coupling pulls up into the engine, and that flange is gone. Apparently there was a problem with that, a known problem, because Honda did change the design later on these bikes and went to a different style flange. I don't know whether it wears off, rusts off, but it's missing. It looks to me like it just rusted off. So you can buy a repopped full exhaust system for around $350 US, which I am not going to do. I'm going to fabricate my own flange and weld it on eventually. The tricky part there isn't fabricating or welding, it's getting the dimensions right. So I don't know what I'm going to do there, or how I'm going to do it rather. I think I know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to go about it quite yet. You will notice also that I did not break down all the assemblies. So when you look at the handlebars, for instance, I didn't take them all apart. I will eventually take them apart enough to get the components off so I can send it off for rechroming and make sure that they're straight. I think they're straight, but I'll check them over in more detail later. But at this point, I'm not breaking down all the assemblies like the handlebars, the front forks. I'll leave those, the wheels, I'll leave those assemblies intact until I get around to working on that part of the project. My next steps, I think, are going to be getting the frame ready for paint. So the frame, the swing arm, and I think the engine covers. There might be a few other pieces that Honda Silver that I'll be painting here in the next few weeks. Because you got to have the frame really ready to go. And I am going to be up against the weather only because it's midsummer right now. And I paint in the morning, so I'll have probably about 6 more weeks to work with. That I'll have mornings that are warm enough that I'll be able to spray outside. So I've got 4 to 6 weeks to get the frame painted. It might seem like a lot of time, but you get busy with these things and it goes by pretty quickly. So the frame painting, swing arm painting, the silver parts, and the engine. The engine is probably going to be the next thing I'll get up on the bench and see if I can't get into that and start figuring out what's going on. That'll be a full rebuild, of course. Bearings, seals, it depends on what I find. I might have to bore it, I don't know. One other note on the frame I didn't mention a moment ago. The steering stem bearings in the top and bottom are the typical ball bearing style with races. I did check, there is an all balls kit for this frame, so I am going to use the all balls kit rather than replacing the bearing races and ball bearings with Honda parts. You can still get them, by the way. Those are all still available, those ball bearings and races, but for probably less money than putting all that together from Honda, I can just get an all balls kit and it's a lot less hassle actually put together. Of course, I'll have to drive the races out of the steering head there and then off the steering spindle itself when I get to that point. I think that's going to be about it. Oh, one other thing. Here's a list I was working on. As you can see, I've started, as I was breaking the bike down, I started making some notes. So the missing items here. This isn't complete or all-inclusive at this point. This is just what I noticed when I was breaking the bike down. Then on the second page is the chrome, and then some notes that I made of things that I noticed as I was working through the project. So I'll keep adding to this list as I continue working through the project and then scratching them off. And you can see actually one there already removed because I found that part was in that box of pieces that I talked about earlier in the video from the guy I bought this from. So I think that's going to be it for this this video, folks. I'm not sure when I'll bring you back. It probably will be when I'm working on the motor. So start breaking that down, seeing what's going on inside. I'm not sure how much of that I'll capture for you, but certainly I'll include you in some of that so you can see what's going on. That's going to be it for today. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.